Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we are talking about the health of your gut and specifically how it's related to your emotional well being. Even if you don't think that you have digestive issues, Ayurveda tells us that the health of your gut is related to so much more. We had an amazing amount of questions for our last webinar, and we took some of those questions and we'd like to answer them for you today, as well as give you some additional information. So joining us today is Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary. She's an integrative neurologist, Ayurvedic practitioner, and author of The Prime. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Chaudhary.
Thank you, Val. It's great to be back doing this again. And I was so moved by the number of questions we got after the last webinar. So we're going to dive into some of those, and then depending on how much time we have remaining, we'll take some new questions as well today.
Okay, so our first question is there, in fact, a connection between gut health and emotional balance?
Oh boy, is there. And this is what I find to be really amazing is how often we assume we have certain personality traits or certain emotional or psychological tendencies, and it's all related to gut health. And over and over and over and over again, I have patients who come in who say, well, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm just an angry person. And as we work on just normalizing their gut health and really normalizing their microbiome, one of the first things that stuns so many people is how these so-called, fixed psychological traits just simply dissolve. And I'll share a story with you that happened to me recently, just as an example of this. So I recently, we went out to one of the local Indian restaurants here. And as soon as I ate this one sauce, I knew something was not right in this sauce. And within 30 minutes, it hit me that, oh yes, we were about to get food poisoning because my body started to react. But the way my body reacted, the initial wave of reaction was I had literally just this wave of anxiety that passed from head to toe. Now, I'm not typically an anxious person, so it was easy to just watch it rather than take it seriously. And I knew that I had just ingested something that, clearly had like some type of parasitic bacteria, the wrong type of bacteria, somebody unwanted in my system. And so the first response that my body had to this was the neurotransmission of anxiety. But again, once your microbiome gets healthy and you know the steps to take to keep it healthy, when these things come up, they're easy to recognize as something not you, meaning you can really just witness it. You can tell that it's just this biochemical wave. And then, of course, within, an hour, I had more of the physical response, rash, fever, and all of the other fun stuff that goes along with food poisoning. But it was kind of, I don't want to call it fun, but this is the scientist in me, of course, who's like, oh, what a beautiful demonstration of the connection of the microbiome and, your mind and your emotions, because it was just like clockwork. We were just having a perfectly pleasant lunch, and then 30 minutes into the meal, just wave of anxiety. And then it was interesting because as soon as I realized what was going on, I went home and I juiced some Loki and bitter melon and took some Sudarshan, which happened to all, of course, fortunately be in the fridge. And as soon as I took that, the anxiety left. And then what was interesting, though, because now your liver has to process all of these toxins, right? So I killed off the bacteria by taking those interventions and opened the channels for the detoxification process to occur. But then what happened is my liver now had all of these endotoxins that it had to manage and deal with, right? And so the next wave was all of this anger and frustration. But again, it was easy to just kind of step back and go, oh, okay, this is the next wave of this process because I was able to link it to I ate this and I had to do this, and now my liver is having to do this. But, for many of us who don't know this connection between our gut and our microbiome and emotions, how many times have you just eaten the wrong thing? And it may not be food poisoning, but something that is triggering an inflammatory response or shifting your microbiome. And you have no idea that that's the reason why you suddenly feel panicked, or that's the reason why you're suddenly angry, or maybe you're chronically angry or chronically panicked. So this is an absolutely huge connection. And, I oftentimes will tell patients when they come in and say, oh, I'm like this or I'm like that, until you have a balanced, healthy gut, you don't really know who you are, because a lot of the constant fluctuations in a day of your emotions and your thoughts, they're really nothing more than just fluctuations in your microbiome. And so until you have that nice steady state, you really don't have a sense of who you are. And then once you have that steady state, once something gets introduced to throw it off, it's really easy to step away from it and recognize it as, oh, this is just biochemistry happening in my body, and I know it's going to pass, which, within about 24 hours, all of this had completely passed, and I was back to being me.
So we can blame the food for a lot of those mood swings.
Well, the food plays a huge role. And, as I always say, we're ultimately the food we eat. And the mind in particular is really derived from the combination of the foods we eat and the impact it has with the microbiome. Mm-hmm. So until you have that balance, I don't want to say we're only the food we eat, but our mind is certainly affected by that. And we're way, way, way more than the mind. But if you can't recognize just the fluctuations in the mind, it's very hard to know that you are behind all of that. Once you start to recognize that the fluctuations of the mind are so impacted by the body and vice versa, once you can recognize that, then you start to get the sense of, wait, but if I'm watching all that there, I've got to be the viewer of all of this. Like, I can't be the movie. I must be the audience watching this movie. So that's kind of step one, is just getting your microbiome into balance. And then you'll just notice, like, when these fluctuations occur and how easy it is to correlate it to something that you've eaten.
Now, in your book, The Prime, you line out a step-by-step program to allow people to cultivate that connection.
Absolutely. That's the whole purpose of The Prime. It was one, to educate people that this connection actually does exist. And it was a connection that, I studied over the course of a decade as a neurologist, because I would watch all of this unfold in my patients. And so the first part is just to educate you. And then the second part is to implement these principles into a 4-step plan so that you can actually take control. And although the book is, the title of the book alludes to spontaneous weight loss, because almost anyone who does it loses weight. But the whole purpose of it was to reignite this healthy connection between the brain and the gut, so that you're living consciously and you have, more energy and you have more mental clarity, and that you're not just the victim of fluctuating populations in your gut anymore, that you're living a deliberate life.
Yeah, so the program is equally, has attention on not just gut health and what you're eating, but a lot of the mental component in there as well.
Absolutely, because it was a program that I created for reversing neurological disease, and it just happened to cause weight loss, which is what grabbed everybody's attention. But as a neurologist, I thought it was pretty cool that it reversed neurological disease.
Okay, so then if we look at stress specifically as an emotional state, how does that chronic stress or daily stress, how can that start to affect the health of your gut?
So stress is the biggest component that impacts our microbiome. And unfortunately, we're really living in a culture, although it's certainly changing because people are becoming more and more aware of this, but we're living at a time where stress seems somehow normal. to be constantly pressured and constantly feeling like you're running on a treadmill is now just the normal way of being. But that constant go, 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 it stimulates your sympathetic nervous system. And one of the responses that your body has to the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is a completely appropriate response, is it shuts down digestion. Because your sympathetic nervous system is your fight, flight response. And it's saying that you're in danger. And if you're in danger, the last thing you're going to do is sit down and have this beautiful big meal. But in this case, it's not that a lion's chasing you. It's just the constant, I've got to go from this to then this to then this. And we're just always living kind of in the next step. And that's a very, very sympathetic response. Your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the exact opposite, is the one that gives the signal to rest and digest. So when you're in that state of chronic stress, it takes all of the energy and all of the biochemistry that would normally go towards digestion and essentially just turns it off. And as that gets turned off, it has a radical impact on your microbiome. Now, we're supposed to have this for very, very short periods when we are in fact in danger, but not for chronic periods, meaning the majority of our day. And then, those days turn into weeks, turn into months, into year. And so when you're under this chronic stress, it starts to have an extremely negative impact on the microbiome. But, I always tell people the microbiome is this living organism, and it's amazing how fast it changes. So just from taking simple steps to reduce your stress starts to have an immediate impact on the microbiome. What we're finding is that within 24 hours of doing something, you can see a corresponding shift in your gut bacteria. So even just, a meditation practice twice a day, it will have an immediate impact on your microbiome. Or doing some of the recommendations in the Prime, like taking the Trifla, the Prime tea, ashwagandha and Brahmi are fantastic for helping to manage the biochemistry and particularly the neurochemistry of stress. So as soon as you start to incorporate these positive things, you will begin to shift your microbiome immediately. So it doesn't mean that just because you have lived a certain way that you are somehow fated to continue living that way and continuing having the repercussions of the negative microbiome that has been cultivated from that kind of a lifestyle. And this is why people are oftentimes surprised, Val. I get emails all the time saying, how did this happen? Like in a week, I'm already starting to feel better. Or, within the first month, my psoriasis cleared up, or my gas is completely gone, or my energy has gone up. And it's because the microbiome is this living, dynamic population that moves as you move.
Mm-hmm. And what about when, I know there's a lot in the knowledge of Ayurveda about this, but could you speak to the way in which we eat? A lot of us, we take very short amount of time for lunch. We eat quickly. People drive through. I see people eat in their cars, all this kind of thing. And what kind of impact does that have on your digestion or this? I mean, that's stressful to eat like that.
Absolutely. The impact is it's a bad impact. It's not the way we're designed to eat. When you look at the way we were built and when you look at the cultures, not even too long ago, we don't have to look thousands of years ago. Let's just look 100 years ago or even 200 years ago. We're not designed to eat on the go. It's not the way that our body works. Our body has a complete relationship with food, meaning we have to look at it, we have to smell it, you have to taste it. Even just hearing the food cooking starts to trigger certain neurochemical responses and starts to release certain juices in the stomach. You want to touch it. My son to this day eats with his fingers because that's how you eat in India. And I could just completely encourage it because he's got an actual tactile relationship to the food. And that's one of the ways that you are sending the signals in your body that food is coming. And so basically your senses have been created to bring your mind onto your food. And so if your mind is on something else, how are you supposed to be digesting? I mean, just look at it as like any other relationship. If you are on a date with your partner and you're on your cell phone the entire time, or you're talking to somebody else, or you're watching television, they go, hey, I don't even feel attended to. But you're not going to nurture that relationship. But food is the exact same thing. You have to have a relationship with it. And if your body is not receiving all of the signals through all your senses that food is coming, your body's not going to prepare to receive it. So it's just like any other relationship. You gotta focus. And when you do, just like all relationships, when you give the energy, and it becomes very, very rewarding. And then your food gives you something back. And that's the whole point of eating, is for there to be this communication between you and the food. And then the food is giving you information, in the form of amino acids, in the form of vitamins and so forth, in the form of different nutrients. It's giving you information to tell your body, do this.
So much intelligence from nature right there. Okay, so someone asks, meditation works wonders for my stress. How does it affect my microbiome?
So just like we were saying earlier, when you take these practices that seem like they're, so simple. I mean, meditation is one of the simplest things that you can do on the planet. I'm just always stunned that everybody is not meditating, because it's so ridiculously simple, but the impact that it has on your health it's so profound. And if we were to bottle a pill that did the same things that meditation did, I mean, everybody would be buying it, because they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It does everything right for your body. But what it does is meditation takes you out of that fight flight response and relaxes your body, turns on your parasympathetic nervous system, and actually allows your body to release the stress that has accumulated. And many people think that, when they're meditating, they're having all these thoughts, oh, I'm not meditating right. I get that all the time. Well, I tried to meditate, but, I didn't have complete and perfect silence. And I was like, no, because you're detoxing your brain during meditation. And so meditation literally just detoxes your brain, but it detoxes all of your other organs. So I'll have, people sometimes come in and say after they started meditating, they started noticing all this stuff coming out of their stomach, or their, what we call the solar plexus in the chakra system, but all this stuff started coming out from their abdomen. And I was like, that's perfect, because it's just pulling all of this stress out that's accumulated in those organs. And when it does that, then your organs begin to function more appropriately. They start to function more optimally. So literally within a very, very short amount of time, you're essentially giving your microbiome a boost and helping to open the channels of all of your digestive organs so that you can do to food what you were meant to do, and that is to digest it. Imagine that. Actually being able to digest the food that you eat. So if there's anybody who hasn't incorporated meditation, and this is one of the recommendations in the Prime in stage 4, it's about the simplest thing you could possibly do for your microbiome, for your gut health, and for your brain health.
And we have a video too of someone in your Prime club who did, he was a longtime meditator. He did the Prime program, and he comments in the video about how it enhanced his meditation and how they went hand in hand.
Yeah, this has been something that's been really interesting to me to watch. Because, I've been a long time meditator. I started meditating when I was 9 years old. And so I thought I kind of, had this down, that, I know how to meditate, and, had all of these wonderful experiences during meditation. But until your gut is healthy, you can't actually have the ultimate experiences in meditation. There's such a deep connection between gut health, the digestive system, and the nervous system, that until you open up those channels, you don't have the fullest experiences. And I was really, really surprised that when I started, back into Ayurvedic medicine, and then as I progressed and started doing the Prime myself on a regular basis, that one of the greatest rewards from it was just how wonderful my meditations had become. So again, it just kind of goes back, and forth between this connection between gut and brain, that what's good for one is good for the other, and vice versa. So as you improve your gut, it improves your mind, which improves your meditation practice. As you meditate, it improves your mind, which improves your gut health.
Mm-hmm.
It's a win-win. It's the ultimate win-win.
Very nice. Okay, so is it possible to change the makeup of your microbiome just by reducing stress?
It's not only possible, but it's like one of the fastest and most profound ways to do it. And this is a common understanding, in Ayurveda, and I think in many of the ancient cultures, that when somebody is living peacefully, they can even eat poison and transform that into ojas, transform that into something of benefit to the body. That when you are in a place of mental and emotional equilibrium, food really no longer becomes toxic. And there's a great study that was done many, many decades ago that kind of shows this. And this has to do with rabbits, but there were two rabbits, populations of rabbits. The whole population was being fed this high cholesterol food because they were studying the effects of high cholesterol foods on arteries. But it turned out that the keeper of one of the rabbits, as he was feeding the food, was massaging the rabbits, was rubbing the rabbits. And that group of rabbits never developed high cholesterol and never developed coronary artery disease. And so it just goes back to show you how relaxation transforms everything. That when you are in a relaxed state, your body can transform almost anything into something of value, and it can process the toxins. So really what you're trying to do through meditation is just turn off the sympathetic nervous system, turn back on the parasympathetic nervous system, and bring your biochemistry into a state of relaxation so that no matter what life brings you, you're able to transform it into something positive, whether it's, food, whether it's an angry person, whether it's, a traffic jam, that no matter what you need to digest, you're actually able to.
Yes. Okay. Now, through the course of us talking today, we keep getting a few questions that are coming up again and again. And
Okay.
so I'd like to ask you those now. One is about the role of probiotics and the microbiome.
So I talk about this in the book, and people are oftentimes surprised that, in the prime, I don't include probiotics because all the talk is about probiotics. It's not that I'm against probiotics. It's just that until you change the environment in your gut, I always kind of liken taking probiotics to sending Girl Scouts into World War III. You haven't created an environment for them to survive. And so, I'm a complete fan of probiotics, but only once you have actually reduced the amount of toxins and inflammation in the GI tract so that they actually have a home where they can survive. So what I typically do is it's after people complete the prime, then, I will place them on probiotics, and just depending on their current digestive state will decide what type of probiotics those are. Because many people will take probiotics, but they haven't actually, healed their gut, and they're very disappointed by the results. They're like, I didn't really feel anything. And it's because you haven't created a space for them to really flourish. The other thing to keep in mind is you have all of that bacteria within you. If you create the circumstances for it to grow, it will start to populate. It's not that you're short on probiotics. They're there. They may just be in very small colonies because the environment isn't friendly to them, but they're all there. And so, sometimes in the beginning, if somebody has had a devastating gut event, we'll have to add probiotics. But, I always tell people, remember, they're in ya. You wouldn't be alive if they weren't there. They're just kind of, in smaller populations than they need to be.
So what about, a lot of people have asked about kombucha or fermented foods as sources of probiotics, or when to incorporate those?
So also a really, really great question. And the answer is, it depends. Ayurvedic medicine is not a huge fan of fermented foods. And the main reason is that they do tend to be very, very heating. So when taken by the wrong person, they can actually aggravate the problem. So I'm not actually a big fan of kombucha because it tends to have a very mixed population of microorganisms. And so some people can take it, but they can manage the population by balancing out with what they already have, but that usually requires a stronger digestion. So if somebody is kind of struggling still, I will aim to place them first just on oral probiotics, and then as their Agni or their digestive fire gets stronger, we'll switch to doing lassi, which is a fermented dairy drink. Fermented dairy is typically one of the main fermented products that is recommended in Ayurvedic medicine. So usually then I'll switch them to lassi at lunch, or if their digestion is a little stronger, I'll switch them to kefir at lunch, and we'll add spices to it and water it down a little bit. Spices like ginger, cumin, coriander, a lot of things that are in the prime curry powder, just to help for that to be digestive, easy to digest. So that's typically the route that I go, is instead of doing something as strong as kombucha or fermenting, everything that you're eating, because you can cause an imbalance by doing too much of that. The occasional little pickle or something with lunches is fine, but large amounts can cause another type of imbalance. I will just go kind of on this very gentle, gradual path. But for those who swear by kombucha and love their kombucha, what I would just recommend is that if you're going to use it in small quantities. You only need like a tablespoon with meals. You don't need anything more than that. So this whole concept of having these giant bottles of kombucha, it's, that's not by necessity, that's just by marketing. But what you actually need is just a very, very, very little amount if you want to do it.
Okay, that's great. I know a lot of people will be excited to have that information and your view on it. Okay, so is there anything else, Dr. Chaudhary, that you would like to, some last words that you have for us?
Yes, stop taking your life so seriously. That we came here to have some fun, and I'm not saying that that means a party 24 hours a day, but sometimes we take life so seriously, and it's just this self-generated stress, and then we end up coming up with these elaborate, complicated schemes to try to bring balance back. And the easiest way to bring balance into your life is really through just simplicity. Like, look at ways that you can just simply simplify your life. The way that you eat, make it simple. The way that you work, make it simple. Your relationships, make it simple. Your socialization, make it simple. That when you live with simplicity, it naturally decreases the amount of stress in your life. And when you don't take everything in life so seriously, including yourself, which, I'm telling you, it's, if there was anyone who took themselves seriously, hello, right here. But one of the greatest lessons that I have learned is just not to, not to get so caught up in all of the details. I had a teacher of mine who once said, wear life like a loose jacket. And I was like, what a beautiful way to look at it. That, just don't let it wrap you into such a tight fit. That just wear life like a loose jacket, and know that, there's times when that jacket gets changed into another jacket, and just to kind of allow the flow of life. But, I know it sounds simpler when somebody says it, but if you really hold that intention, you'll be amazed to see just how simple your life can actually get. And it's usually living in that simplicity that you find, joy. And it's always in the simplest things. Just look at children. My son is growing a caterpillar farm right now. And there's two about to become butterflies. And every morning he runs down to go see how these caterpillars grow. And it's become like an entire family event. We all run down to see these caterpillars. And the amount of joy that these caterpillars, just watching them hatch from their little eggs, and as they get bigger, and now they're these giant caterpillars, they're just about to make cocoons. The amount of joy that we get from just watching that simple transformation in nature is dumbfounding. We're just so excited. Every morning we get up and we're just so excited to see what's going on with the caterpillars. And life can be like that. It can just be filled with a lot of simple pleasures. And your microbiome, it enjoys simplicity too, in the way that you think and in the way that you eat.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. We always appreciate your insight and these, I don't know, it seems very realistic, the tips that you've been able to share with us, and comfortable too. So thank you for that, Dr. Chaudhary. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Again, we'll send out a replay link for you. If you do have questions, please let us know. If you have other ideas of webinars you'd like to see us host, let us know that too. We're happy to listen. Thanks for tuning in.
My pleasure.